But we do want to talk about the migrant caravan heading up to Martha's Vineyard, courtesy of Governors Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis. So
they're not bringing their best, I heard.
Well, I think they did send their best to Martha's Vineyard. There were only 50 on the plane, so they had to be pretty selective.
So it's the cream of the crop.
They were sending, the cream of the crop, exactly, to go meet Obama at his mansion there. So anyway, news broke of this on Sunday when a bus arrived outside the home of Vice President Harris in Washington, D.C. And Russell, you emailed me a link saying we should try to cover this. I'm like, yeah, we should. It's too quick. We don't have time to prep it at all. And then a plane landed on Martha's Vineyard with 50 more migrants from Venezuela. And as it turns out, this was, of course, a political stunt, a very cynical and mean-spirited one by Governors DeSantis of Florida and Greg Abbott of Texas. But as mean-spirited as it is, I mean, my take on this is going to be like, yeah, what they did was horrible. Treating people as pawns like this, deceiving them, telling them, yeah, there's going to be, shelter and jobs for you when you get there. And then they land only to find out that this is all just a big trick, basically, a big way to stick it to the Democrats. As horrible as that is, the system being what it is, just from a macro level, doesn't allow for any sort of non-horrible options here. Like when people show up at the border, there is no real humane way to handle this situation, as we're going to demonstrate by playing two clips back to back. So the first clip is of Governor Ron DeSantis explaining that now the Biden White House is acting with urgency now that the migrants showed up at the doorsteps of the sort of Martha's Vineyard one percenters. So let's hear him make that point, and then we're going to hear the rebuttal from his challenger this November in Florida, Democratic gubernatorial candidate Charlie Crist. So we're going to play these two clips kind of back to back, and then we'll go from there.
I also was a little bit perplexed when I heard that the president is scrambling to get his cabinet together to try to address the fact that you have governors who are helping to relocate illegal aliens to sanctuary cities. Now, he didn't scramble to get his cabinet together when we had millions of people illegally pouring across the southern border. He didn't scramble to get his cabinet together when you had 53 migrants die in some trailer in Texas because they were neglected by the federal government. You didn't see him scramble to get his cabinet together when we had Americans that were victimized by criminal aliens that he led across the border. You didn't see him scramble to get his cabinet together when we hit record fentanyl deaths, which that fentanyl is coming across his open border. It's only when you have 50 illegal aliens end up in a very wealthy, rich sanctuary enclave that he decides to scramble on this. And so I think what we are doing I think what we're continuing to do is use every tool at our disposal to insulate the state of Florida from the negative ramifications of his reckless border policies.
Okay, so if there was any doubt in anyone's mind that Ron DeSantis is running for president, this should dispel it, because he deported immigrants at Florida's expense from Texas to Martha's Vineyard. That is somebody who simply wants to insert himself into Greg Abbott's stunt. He wants a piece of the action. There was no Florida reason to do this.
Well, this has been his play all along. Notice whenever a national story breaks, he tries to inject himself into it. He's basically trying to clout chase his way into the Republican nomination. By just grabbing headlines as they pop up, he tries to inject himself in.
After this, I'm convinced now, I wasn't sure about this before, I'm convinced now that he's running even if Trump does. Because
he would run no matter what.
You wouldn't push it this far. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if the political calculus worked for him now, or if he felt it did. Now he's saying no, he's going. No doubt about it. Now, that having been said, whatever you feel about the morality of what they're doing, this is one of the most genius trolls in the history of politics. This is a brilliant troll because Democrats are the NIMBY party. And to send this problem to Martha's Vineyard, they're the jewel in the crown of vacationing liberal elites, who very quickly sent them to a military base in Cape Cod, by the way. AOC, even in spite of that, praised the people of Martha's Vineyard for showing what they're about. Now I'm officially in the AOC is a fucking idiot camp.
Well, that's not just AOC did that. All the liberal media did that. Showering praise upon the people of Martha's Vineyard. They did the Christian thing. Yeah, they did the Christian thing for about, 45 minutes?
For 45 minutes and sent them to an army base.
Right, yeah, exactly.
You didn't say, no, we don't want these people in an army base. We'll take them into our homes. Oh, my God.
90% of which are empty, by the way, because summer's over. So there's plenty of square footage.
Put them in some of those seaside mansions you have there. Some of those.
I'm sure Obama's got 9 to 10 spare bedrooms in that mansion.
Wasn't he?
Put a 12 bedroom?
And that's what makes this such a genius.
You can fit the whole plane load in there.
Well, and that's what makes this so genius, because they're not wrong. They're not wrong that liberals have this tendency to point a finger at other communities, but then they don't want those things in their backyard. They'll go on and on about more humane prison system, but you try to put a halfway house in their neighborhood. Oh, no, sir. No, sir. Any politician who suggests it is going to feel the wrath of the libs very quickly. Can you imagine they sent 50? What if they sent 50,000? How do you think they'd react in Martha's Vineyard? Would they still be demonstrating their Christian values before, especially if there wasn't an available army base to shunt them off to? Yes, whatever you feel about Abbott and DeSantis and the cynicism of this, and of course it's a cynical political stunt, doesn't mean they're not exposing a genuine underlying hypocrisy of the liberal class in a way that's very effective. It's very effective. When Adams and Lori Lightfoot and Bowser come out there hysterical, wow, man, that you couldn't pay for that kind of a Fox News moment, a tailor-made Fox News moment of liberal hypocrisy than them freaking out about immigrants being sent to their cities.
Well, look, in terms of surface level sort of NIMBY hypocrisy, that's absolutely true, but it actually goes a lot deeper than that. It speaks to a general hypocrisy of liberals, of never Trump Republicans, of the media. It speaks to just the general hypocrisy of the system itself. When you take a look at the response of, we talked about Adams and Lightfoot. Let's hear from the guy who's trying to take Ron DeSantis' job in 2 months. Republican turned Democratic congressman turned Democratic gubernatorial nominee Charlie Crist.
I mean, it's outrageous what he's done. This is Hispanic Heritage Month, and this is how he treats Hispanics in our country. It's unbelievable. It is beyond the pale. The guy has no moral compass. I mean, I just can't believe it. And another example of it is how he treats women in my state, taking away their right to choose, and then signs a law that doesn't even give exceptions for rape or incest.
Yeah.
It's beyond the pale. If people want to help us, they should go to charliechrist.com, because Florida needs help and we need it now.
Well, let's talk about a solution, Congressman, because, yes, it's a political stunt. Obviously, anytime you lure somebody somewhere on false pretenses, this is a political stunt. However, do you agree that there is a crisis at the southern border? I mean, the Border and Patrol agents say that they are having to encounter something like 200,000 migrants a month, that it has spiked to that level. I mean, it's unsustainable, they're saying. Do you agree that it's a crisis?
There's a challenge at the border. There's no question about it. But there are ways to deal with it that are responsible and ways that are irresponsible.
But what
and
are
our
the solutions?
Irresponsible Governor DeSantis is doing it all wrong.
What's the solution?
I'm sorry? Well, the solution is to be smart about it, to be humane about it, to not be barbaric about it. Treat these people like the human beings that they are, not throw them into lure them into an airplane. And I don't know how he chartered this thing.
Throw them platitudes. Let them eat platitudes.
Texas and lure people to get on it and fly up to the northern part of our country. I mean, this is a weird story. Let's be honest about it. And that's why I've asked through a Freedom of Information Act request to the governor's office.
Okay, blah, blah, blah. Be kind about it. Be smart about it. Don't be barbaric about it. Well, look, like I said at the beginning of this segment here, the only way to be kind about it, to be humane about it, would be to let these people in. These are refugees who just walked over 2,000 miles through extraordinarily dangerous terrain. The border between Colombia and Panama is called the Darien Gap. That's one of the most dangerous areas in the world. The humane thing to do is to admit all of them. Now, does this system afford us the ability to do that? The answer, no, it does not. No, it doesn't. You can't get to a place where you can treat people like this humanely without reforming the entire system. And this is the systemic sort of hypocrisy of the Trump era and now the post-Trump era, or maybe the between Trump's
the Obama era,
right? And the Obama era too, but especially in the Trump era, because in 2016, not to rehash the Democratic primary, but there was an opportunity for Democrats to nominate a candidate who was at least going to put everything he had into systemic reform such that we may be able to treat people a little kinder or a little better. In fact, one of Bernie's plans in 2020 that he outlined was creating a sort of UN for the Western Hemisphere so that migrant crises like this didn't start in the first place, right? A sort of contract with Central and South American nations to sort of build stability in that part of the world rather than using the southern part of the southwestern hemisphere as a plantation for the United States, right? So, like, those are some solutions, but those far transcend anything that you can do here. The reason Charlie Crist had no answer there is because there is no good answer to how do we respond to a border crisis inside this system. Well, this system that we have set up runs on draconian border enforcement, whether there is a Democrat in office or a Republican in office. Part of the reason you have a migrant crisis now is precisely because people come to the border assuming that the Biden administration is going to be nicer than the Trump administration was. That's part of the reason they're coming up. And once they get here, they realize, oh, they're not much nicer because they can't be. We can't be. This structure cannot hold when you have influxes of people like this. Now, I would love to reform our system to the point where we could take in all of these refugees, but you know what? Neither the establishment Democrats, nor the establishment Republicans, nor the MAGA Republicans, obviously, are interested in doing that. And so the limitations of what any sort of solution could be to this problem are sort of imposed upon us by the structures that are in place. And when you talk about the hypocrisy of the Trump era, look at the 2020 presidential debates between Biden and Trump. You know, look at what a crisis this country was in. Watching those debates, it was a contest of who was going to do less to solve them, right? Trump says, you want socialized medicine. Biden, no, I don't. No, not me. You want to ban fracking? No, I don't. When it comes to healthcare, when it comes to the environment, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to wages, right? When it comes to all of these issues, we are in a sort of paralyzed state where most people feel that the country is on the wrong track, but there is not anywhere near the political will necessary to do anything about it. And this is just one example of that, and that's why Charlie Crist had no answer there. He embarrassed himself more than any Republican would be embarrassed when asked that question.
Well, there are a couple things going on there. One, Chris Licht is the new head of CNN, and he has basically put out the signal that he wants a nonpartisan network that does not carry water for Democrats. And I think the level of pushback that Crist got there was an example of this woman not wanting to go the way of Don Lemon. She wants to keep her
Seltzer.
job.
What's his name?
Brian Seltzer. Stelter. Brian Stelter.
Yeah. I honestly
Brian
forgot
Stelter.
what his name was. It just sounds like Seltzer.
Look, Licht has put the fear of God in that whole staff. Like, no more the big lie. They're not allowed to say that on air anymore. Like, all of that MSNBC shit, they can't do it anymore. So her, like, really, that, I think 2 years ago, or even a year ago, you would not have seen that on CNN. Like, she was doing real reporting. She was doing real,
I think you still would have
questions.
No, I think they would still have pushback like that, because that's a situation where you just run into a wall, because the system, like I said, will just not allow the system will not allow for a humane solution to this.
I don't think. Yes, I understand that, but I also understand CNN. And
yeah, but what
CNN has been post-Trump, and she might have asked it once, but she kept following up and going in on it and not letting them get away with the easy answer. And I have not seen that kind of pushback from CNN on a Democrat, especially on the verge of an election against somebody that they hate, in quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make that point, because, this wasn't an example of like pushing back against a particularly left-wing position, like they would shit on Medicare for all during the Bernie era, during those campaigns.
This is the best kind of Democrat, a former Republican. So he's a Democrat in good standing. Those people are in much better standing than anyone who actually comes out of the progressive left, even nominally, like Warren is with these people. No, they'll push back on an Elizabeth Warren all day, but not a Charlie Crist, especially a Charlie Crist running against Ron DeSantis a couple of months out of the election. I think that's a result of Chris Licht coming in with the guillotine and taking off heads left and right.
Maybe. I mean, that could be right. But either way, I mean, what you saw there was her ask, okay, yes, we agree this was a stunt, which it no doubt was. We agree that it's immoral to treat people as pawns
it's an ongoing stunt. They're going to keep doing it. They're going to keep sending them to New York. Like, first it started with the it wasn't New York first. They did DC first. And then basically Adams opened his mouth about it, and Abbott pulled a mob move. Oh, you got a problem with it, huh? Yeah, well, why don't you take some fucking immigrants too, motherfucker? Sent the immigrants up to Adams. And now they're getting tired of that troll, and they decided to up the ante. Well, how about Martha's Vineyard? Why don't we? I mean, next they're going to send them to Beverly Hills. That'll
right.
That'll be, and actually that'll probably be cheaper. It's closer.
Yeah, much closer.
But you're saying Malibu? They'll start sending them there. San Francisco. But you're saying we need to reconstruct the system, and you're right. I think something that people on the left don't want to deal with in this conversation is, look what you just said. You got 200,000 immigrants coming in a month. That is a crisis, and it is a crisis for these communities at the border. Like, yes, this is a political stunt, but that doesn't mean it's a stunt that's not illustrating a legitimate issue. Like, what would happen if you had 200,000 immigrants a month pushing up at the border of Massachusetts? You think these libs would all be, look how they're reacting to a few thousand being sent into their states? How would they react if 200,000 immigrants a month were showing up in Boston? So look, I mean, in the end, what they're saying, hey, this is a problem for us, and you keep calling us racists every time we say ouch about this. Okay, have some immigrants. Is it a scummy way to go about it? Is it a stunt? Sure. Are they drawing attention to a legitimate gripe? Yeah. I mean, people on the left do not want to concede that, but sure it is. And you're seeing it right now. That's what made it such a brilliant troll. Okay, so you take them. Let's see how you react. And we can see how all of these mayors have reacted to this.
Right. And it's a very effective troll against this modern incarnation of the Democratic Party, which I called in previous shows the end of history party, because it's a party that does not want to push any real reform outside the boundaries of what, status quo enforcers deem acceptable to them, right? Like, you won't have a Democratic president probably in our lifetime. I'm sorry to tell everybody, but certainly not within the next decade, who says we should slash our military budget in half, right? You won't get that. You won't get that. And that's the level of reform that would be necessary if you wanted to even begin to talk about taking in 2.5 million Venezuelan refugees per year, right? Not all Venezuelan per year, but it's actually, that was, my mental math was a bit wrong.
Yeah,
there.
like how
but
many
it wasn't
are there
that far off. Since 2013, 6.8 million people have fled that country. It's the largest exodus in the history of the Western Hemisphere. 6.8 million people. Now, if they're getting 200,000 a month, and you're talking about taking in 200,000 people a month, which I think we should aspire to do. We got a lot of fucking land here, man. Drive through fucking Wyoming. You could fit a lot of people in Wyoming, right? I think we should aspire to do that. But this is something you can't accomplish piecemeal.
I mean, just because you have land doesn't mean you have jobs. And
well, but what I'm saying is,
there's a reason nobody's there.
Well, that's true. But what I'm saying is, we should aspire to get to a place where we can be as humane as possible, which, by the way, includes what Bernie was talking about in the 2019 debate, where he brought up a UN-like body for the Western Hemisphere, right? Just nip these migrant crises in the bud by trying our best to make every country as livable and peaceful and as safe and as prosperous as we can. That's the real humane way to deal with this. But there is no piecemeal approach to this. There's no public option version of a solution to this problem. The only humane thing to do is to reform the entire system, which we don't even know. We can't even conceptualize that now. Our current political moment is such that we can't even really visualize what that country would look like, what the United States would look like if it were able to sustain those levels of migrants coming up from the border and us giving them places to live, setting them up, taking them in, which, like I said, I think we should try and get to a place where we can do that. But our politics is so limited now, right? You can't even have a debate about universal health care right now. You can't have a debate about banning fracking right now, right? Even the Democrats, even the opposition to Trumpism is so limited in its vision of what this country can and should be that you're not even approaching a point where you can actually have a humane answer to this problem. And that's why Charlie Crist had no answer. That's why he had no answer, because this is a situation where there is no good answer. Oh, it's inhumane and sleazy and insensitive to put 50 migrants on a plane and send them to Martha's Vineyard? Sure it is. Is it less inhumane to turn them around and say, no, walk the 2,000 miles back to your home country where you can't make enough money to feed your family for a week? Is that the humane thing to do? I would argue no. So then what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What can you do?
Well, this raises a deep moral conundrum. You're presenting the notion, and it's possibly correct, that we can accommodate this number of immigrants with a reform of the system. I don't know that that's true. A lot of people have made the observation, not based on immigration, just based on increasing population, that one of the reasons that America is so much shittier today than it was 50 or 60 years ago is because of population growth. It makes it harder for people to get into colleges because the competition is stiffer. It's one of the reasons Los Angeles is a hellhole. You go back to this very idyllic vision of 1960s Los Angeles. You could drive on the freeway. It wasn't like
just
that.
So we don't get canceled for that. I just want to clarify for you what you mean, just so we don't get canceled for that. We're not talking, replacement theory or anything like that. We're just talking population growth.
I said that at the beginning.
Growth.
I said not immigration, just population growth.
I understand. You got to say things 2 or 3 times though when you're talking like that.
Yeah, no, we're not talking about replacement theory. I'm just talking about he had 2 children and they had 2 children and they had
Right,
2
yeah.
children.
Right.
Yeah,
Population
so it's
growth,
population growth has probably contributed to making the country a shittier place for most people. It was better when you had less people. If you look at the Renaissance, most historians agree, I don't know if any actually disagree, that the plague led to the Renaissance because all those dead people left great material resources to a smaller number of people. There was a lot more land. There were just
Sure.
a lot more space, a lot more available real estate. So it led to a renaissance. It led to an explosion in wealth because you had less mouths to feed. So I don't know if the idea that we can just take people in without a further deterioration of the quality of life in the country to what we've already seen, partly perhaps because of population growth. I don't know that you can really make that argument. I don't know if you can say, no, we could take in 2.5 million people a year. No problem.
Well, I don't know either. And that's my point. My point is that we can't even begin to visualize any set of circumstances in which that is even possible. And the reason we can't visualize that right now is because our politics lack such imagination right now. You're not even allowed to say that we should join the rest of the first world in guaranteeing everybody health care as a right. Like, you're not even allowed to say in Pennsylvania that we want to ban fracking, that we want to phase out fracking. Like, the spectrum now is just so short and so narrow that if John Fetterman were to go right here and say, no, we should try and phase out gas fracking over the next decade, right? Forget it. That's it. He may as well concede the race. Like, we're just so limited as to what we can even imagine right now that you're right. We don't
remember,
know.
There's a democratic component to that too. Like, unlike a lot of the things
absolutely
that the left pushes for, the majority do not. This is part of what the left doesn't get. When the Democrats are clutching their pearls about what DeSantis and Adams are doing right now, what they're doing plays well to most people, and not just most white people. The group in society that is most anti-immigration based on the polling are actually black men. 80% of black men want more restrictions on legal immigration.
Sure.
Forget about illegal immigration.
Gosh,
legal immigration. Yep. So this is not just, white people. It's not. No. Most Americans don't want more immigrants. It's not a popular stance. It's not a popular position. So you have to understand that to understand what an effective troll this is, what they're doing. Oh, well, how about in your neighborhood? That's they couldn't have picked a better stunt to pull, certainly tragically at the expense of these people. Politically, if you don't think this is a win for them, you don't understand this country. You don't understand politics. Overall, this is a net win for the Republicans.
Please clap.